Hey everybody, this is Patriots Worldwide. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to quickly talk about our loss versus the Los Angeles Chargers and our upset victory versus the Buffalo Bills backups. There is a lot to talk about and a lot to say about the future going forward. So without further ado, let's jump right into it and begin. So last week versus the Los Angeles Chargers, the Patriots were outscored 40-7, and those 7 points came off a fluke offsides free play where Drake May unleashed his inner Aaron Rodgers through a deep ball that was caught by Demario Douglas, who got in for the touchdown and was eventually the Patriots' only touchdown of that game. The Chargers really just were able to do whatever they wanted and just ran circles around us as they scored 40 unanswered points. Very frustrating, and overall just another great example of how bad and dysfunctional this team has been this season. After losing by 33 to the Chargers, at home no less, it brought down a lot of spirits and it was very frustrating, as it's been all year. However, there was one major positive upside by losing, which was the Patriots held possession of the number one overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, and if they were to lose the following week versus Buffalo, we would have sole possession of the number one pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, and we would have been able to choose our own destiny and really just aid the rebuilding process immensely. Whether we pick a player, we have our choice of the litter, so to speak, or if we went to trade away, there was a plethora of options, whether we wanted a package of players, picks, any sort of scenario we could have wanted, we could have had. Unfortunately, for that regard and for those circumstances, we did not defeat Buffalo, and we fell from the first overall pick to the fourth overall pick. Now, for me, I was born after the Drew Bledsoe era, so I never saw my team pick first overall. So for me, that would have been a historical thing to see, and maybe we'll see it again one day, who knows. But this win against Buffalo, to me, was very special, and it was very important, and I think it was really awesome that we won, and I will get into why right now. Now, going into this game versus Buffalo, there is a lot to be talked about already. Buffalo and New England are historically a division rival. Really, New England has won that rivalry for the better part of 20 years, while Buffalo has finally found their footing and dominated the division for the past about 4 or 5 seasons, give or take, on the calendar. So, you want to win, you want to beat them, you don't want to lose to your division rival, especially in a sweep. But at the same time, when you think about the number one pick being on the line, you think just rip the Band-Aid off and get over one meaningless loss, because we've been losing all season, so what's one more? And one more loss guarantees a golden opportunity for a bright future. So going into the game, I was torn. I wanted to beat Buffalo, but also really wanted the number one pick, so I was content either way. To me, it was a victory either way. And in the week of the game, Drake May had a hand injury in practice, which raised the question of, will he be playing this Sunday? And if not, who will be playing in his place, Jacoby Brissett or Joe Milton? Now, Joe Milton, to that point, has never taken a professional snap this season. So here I was thinking it was just going to be Jacoby, or maybe May will just tough it out, because this will be the last time he plays football until next August, if he even plays next preseason. So, like a lot of the press conferences were in typical Mayo fashion, and Alex Van Pelt really just not giving a clear answer. One day it was, May will play. The next day it was, oh, well, we're prepared for anything. And then the night of, it seemed like May was named the starter, and things were going to be good. May took a couple of snaps, and then before we knew it, he was out of the game for the rest of the game. And Joe Milton was in, and he had a very, very promising game against third stringers and backups, and people seem to overlook that fact, and amongst some people, it was brewing a quarterback controversy, and I'm just convinced people just want controversy. They want drama. They want another Brady versus Bledsoe debate. It's not like that. Joe Milton came in, had a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. Kayshon Boutte had a career day with 7 catches, 117 yards, and 1 touchdown. I'm telling you, that guy is wide receiver 2 material, and he is really just going to be our lockdown guy for the future. And in upsetting fashion, the Patriots won. They defeated Buffalo 23-16, and believe it or not, these fans in attendance were booing. I don't think I ever saw a Patriot game where we were getting booed at home for scoring a touchdown and not losing. At that moment, that's when I was happy we won, because this is a very harsh thing to say, because I am amongst this fan base, but a lot of this fan base, especially this season, has really shown to me that they are just a bunch of spoiled, entitled brats, and They are so used to winning and they were so accustomed to being successful that they forgot what it was like to suffer in terms of losing football games continuously. Or maybe they were even born during the Belichick and Brady dynasty when it was at its peak, and they have no idea what it's like to have a quarterback with growing pains and struggling on the field, while also having a coach who doesn't know what he's doing or overall just slacking. So to me, everybody has to go through this. I knew during the prime days of Brady and Bill that it was never going to last forever, and a lot of people knew it wasn't going to last forever. There was people from the previous generation who knew how bad it was once like and knew that this good feeling we had for the past 2 decades wasn't going to last forever either. So we're all in this together, guys. Remember that. On a positive side note, before I get into the aftermath, right after Joe Milton scored his first rushing touchdown, he did a backflip. It was pretty cool, very exciting, caught me off guard. It was fun to see because we don't get to see that celebration too often, especially in New England. So it was cool, and I'm glad we got to see it. Okay, and this is where all the questions begin and the answers are absent until further notice. After the game, the team celebrated for the final time on the field. They enjoyed it. They took it in. The Patriots finished with a record of 4-13, just like they had last season. And by winning today, we took ourselves out of the number 1 pick conversation and fell to the number 4 overall pick. We could still land some talented players, but of course, people are disappointed. And yeah, it's a little disappointing because to be right there and not get it, but it is what it is. After the game, players and coaches alike answered questions at the podium, did their final press conference of the year, and I just figured it was over. I thought, hey, the season's over, we can finally rest and enjoy it, get ready for the playoffs, because it's going to be a fun and entertaining postseason. And we're just sitting there, minding my own business, chilling, and I get the notification on my phone from Adam Schefter. Breaking news, the New England Patriots have fired head coach Jerod Mayo after 1 season. And even just saying that now, it shocked me a lot. Because I really liked Jerod Mayo. He was a great player, and unfortunately just not a great coach. In my mind, I know he was very frustrating, has his flaws, walked back on a lot of things he said, and really just didn't live up to a lot of expectations. And going back to what I was referring to with fans having that entitlement complex, it really frustrated me that a lot of people wanted him fired without giving the guy a chance, and in my mind, I thought the man was safe, because Robert Kraft really likes Jerod Mayo. As a matter of fact, he liked him so much that he named him successor to the greatest head coach of all time 5 years ago without having any head coaching experience, and the only coaching experience Jerod had was being the linebackers coach. And I really felt like that spoke volumes, because if you're going to name somebody the head coach and essentially give him the keys to the city without even having any sort of idea on how to coach a team, that really shows that Kraft had a lot of trust in him. And I know this is a terrible example in comparison, but I always saw it as being named head chef without knowing how to boil water. So Mayo was in a terrible situation, and he inherited a team that went 4-13. The defense fell off as the year went on, and it just seemed like we weren't taking things seriously. And yeah, as I mentioned, Jerod was always walking back his comments. For example, last offseason, when asked about free agency, he said, quote, "and we have cash to burn," meaning he was going to spend a lot of money, and then the next day he took it back. We didn't know what to think about it. Every week there was something he said, then the following day he took back. And the one thing I wanted from Jerod was him just to own up for his mistakes. I just wish he stood in front of that podium and just explained, yes, this job was not as easy as I thought it would be, and I've said things that I can't follow through with. Please let me have an opportunity to make it up to you guys. And I was hoping that opportunity would be this upcoming free agency where Jerod and Elliott Wolf and, of course, Robert Kraft would be able to recruit players and use Drake May as a bargaining chip to have young, talented wide receivers like T. Higgins or even Chris Godwin, who's not super young, but he's still very reliable and very talented, to come here and want to play for us, because right now money's not an object. We have the most money to spend right now out of the entire league in terms of cap space. So why not use a lot of it? And I was really thinking, and this was my thought process, you give Jerod a year to learn, establish a culture, and just get your feet wet and have an understanding of how this whole thing works. And then next year, this is your real first year. And by the end of December, we only had 3 victories under our belt. So if Jerod Mayo, after assuming he had an amazing offseason, nailing every draft pick with Elliott Wolf and signing the best free agents we could get our hands on, and still be a 3-win team by next December, then that's when Mayo's seat would heat up. That's what I expected, and Quite frankly, I thought that was the most logical direction we can go in, and unfortunately we didn't. And I will air my complaints right now. My first complaint starts at the chain of command with owner Robert Kraft. To get this out of the way, I love Robert Kraft. I always had a ton of respect for him, and I always looked up to him my whole life with a lot of admiration. I always believed he was the best owner in the NFL, and really, to me, I always thought he was a man of the people. I thought he was somebody we could look at after the days of Brady and Belichick were gone. I thought Kraft would be the guy who can lead us into the future, and his judgment would help us become contenders once again. Now, I can't even put my finger on where his thought process begins. And to me, the one thing I didn't like about Kraft, and I still don't, up until today, it seemed like he did not have the heart to do the business side of football, and he didn't have the heart to make the tough decisions. For example, I believe, and this is controversial, that Bill Belichick should have been let go shortly after Tom Brady left and shouldn't have waited that many years, because while Bill is the greatest head coach of all time, you can argue that he isn't, it doesn't really matter. And even though he wasn't the greatest GM, he was a defensive mastermind, in my mind, the smartest football mind in the history. But there were times where his way of going about things weren't working in the modern NFL, and we needed to change. And the only way to change was either Bill put his ego aside and admitted his faults, or we had to let him go. And even though we did let him go at the start of 2024, it just felt like it was way too late because Kraft wanted to hold on to something that he was very sentimental about. And my complaint is really that I believe Kraft's hand was forced due to the fans and Kraft falling to the pressure. Biggest example, the Patriots draft Drake May and do not play him, despite having a better preseason and camp than both quarterbacks, Brissett and Milton, and Zappi for his short time here while he was still teammates with May. So logically, when you're outperforming both of your teammates, why aren't you playing? And the thought behind that is you're going to sit May so he can learn and develop properly. And by week 6, Jacoby wasn't performing well, and the Patriots put May in against the Houston Texans. While it wasn't the dumbest idea in the world, it just seemed like it was way too soon. In my mind, and this was going back all the way to preseason, I felt May shouldn't play at all this season because this year wasn't about winning or making the playoffs. It was about just establishing a culture and taking a step forward into the next era of the New England offense. So Drake should have just sat for as long as he could, barring an injury to Jacoby. Whether Jacoby was playing lights out or terrible, it shouldn't have mattered. The question on everybody's mind immediately following the draft was, when will Drake May play? Because when you're a rookie quarterback selected in the top 3, no less, you're expected to play at some point this season to showcase what you have to offer for the future going forward. And truthfully, Drake May was in a good position to sit behind Jacoby Brissett, who is very smart because he's learned from Tom Brady and Andrew Luck, and he's a really great mentor and bridge quarterback, and unfortunately just never showcased on the field. And I thought Drake would sit until week 14, which was 1 week following the bye week. You had 4 games left, and at that point, I assumed we'd be mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So Drake can just go out there, have fun, and showcase what he has to offer. And the thing from Kraft's perspective, and we all have to understand, he's a businessman. So when Jacoby was underperforming, Kraft seemed to have to put Drake in to boost ticket sales, merchandise, and make the fans want to come pay to see this kid play, which is a very understandable move and tactic because that's what you have to do in the NFL because it is a business. And that's completely fine and all fair. But to me, it just seemed like Drake started way too early than he should have. And if you're going to start him week 6, why not just start him from the get-go? And my second complaint, of course, goes to the front office. Just seemed like everything wasn't handled as well. Thinking about the draft, Elliott Wolf had an opportunity. He drafted the right positions, just the wrong players. It's easier to say that in hindsight, but you're telling me you thought Jalen Polk was better than Ladd McConkey, better than A.D. Mitchell? A.D. Mitchell has a lot of potential. It was just an unfortunate situation. And for Polk, it sucks even more because he was really good in camp, preseason, and he seemed to be really reliable early on. Maybe as a rookie, Polk had a lot of pressure on his shoulders. The lights were too bright, causing him to underperform. But the thing is, when you're in that position, you got to find that clutch gene, and you got to pull through and be a reliable target. Because Drake was feeding Polk a ton of targets and throwing his way a lot, and Polk just couldn't pull through. It was just embarrassing. In college, he had 1,000 yards, so he was definitely a reliable receiver in his final year. But he would have fallen to the 3rd round. We could have picked him up then. It was a reach and oversight by Elliott Wolf, even in hindsight. And our next receiver we drafted, Javon Baker. I don't even know where to begin on Baker. For somebody who was labeled as a steal and had a lot of high praise, especially of himself. You would think he's this explosive, touted receiver that we can go to in terms of a jump ball situation or needing someone to create separation. Even in preseason, he was dropping easy catches and he wasn't creating the separation. He just wasn't standing out. We all wrote it off as he's just a rookie trying to transition to the pro level and try to write it off. But even these past few weeks, the whole year, really, Javon didn't play. There was no explanation as to why. There were games where he was listed as active, but he still rode the bench the entire game. And even these past couple of weeks, he had under 5 targets each game, caught 2 passes. He wasn't taking advantage of any opportunity, and quite frankly, Drake was forcing passes his way just to get him involved. Obviously, we want all these guys to work out, but it's incredibly frustrating. And again, to the front office, you sign a guy like KJ Osborne, who was touted as a really reliable target, a guy who could probably get you 600 to 800 yards a season. And even in his final season as a Viking, while playing behind Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, Osborne caught 540 yards and 3 touchdowns. To me, that's reliability. When you're playing behind the greatest wide receiver in the game, you're taking advantage of opportunities. And when he came here, I thought Demario Douglas and KJ Osborne would split reps at the slot position, both becoming extremely reliable for the quarterback, whether if it was Drake Mayo or Jacoby Brissett, and both of them would be taking advantage of their opportunity and just making it work. But it didn't work. Was it an oversight by the front office? Was it poor game planning and play calling by Alex Van Pelt and Jerod Mayo? We'll never know because we ended up releasing Osborne in mid-season. It was very frustrating because we want all these guys to work out, but we'll never know what they're capable of without giving them a fair shot. Lastly, in regards to the front office, they just made some terrible decisions to aid the team. I get this isn't Madden where you're just going to be better in a couple of clicks and automatically be a Super Bowl contender. But when you're struggling at the tackle position, just look at the best available tackles, assess and evaluate their situations, and just do your homework on them and pick the right one available that you think is going to benefit our quarterback and protect him for the future. It's not hard. There were plenty of names to go around, like DJ Humphries, Jonah Williams. There were a lot of players we could have signed that can benefit from May's development, and it didn't. We stuck with the guys we had. While Vidarian Lowe is a solid backup, he is not starter material in the slightest. Another thing, this team lacks discipline. That goes on the head coach, strength and conditioning's coach. A lot of people are to take the blame on that. With all the penalties, the holdings, the false starts, it's just so embarrassing to watch each and every week, and I am so glad that this football season is over so we don't have to witness that abysmal lack of discipline anymore. It's just a shame that this franchise has come to this. And I was never a big fan of the contract extensions last offseason, and I'll get more into detail on this in our next episode. But looking back, Ramondre Stevenson, a guy who is so one-dimensional, inconsistent, and fumbles consistently, you're telling me he deserves more money than Derrick Henry, the best running back in the game, and in some arguments could be the MVP? It's laughable at that point. Even Kendrick Bourne, we love Kendrick Bourne, but that was a bit of an overpay for him. And who knows, maybe by next year he'll be gone if we really buckle down in the wide receiver department, unless he's willing to take way less snaps and be our next Matthew Slater in terms of a leader and only going onto the field if he absolutely has to. I don't think he would want to do that, and Kendrick might as well request a trade. We'll see, and I'll give my thoughts and predictions on that next episode. And finally, I really have a lot of frustration in how the firing of Jerod Mayo was handled. Now, despite how we felt about him, I think we all knew that Jerod was never going to be the long-term solution for this franchise's success, and I figured he was going to be our head coach for the next 2 to 3 years, and then we'd move on from him after a couple more of disappointing seasons. In my mind, as I was alluding to earlier, I believe Jerod should not have been fired because this season wasn't about winning and he inherited a bad team, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it all before from me. I think Jerod should have had the chance to have a great offseason, get the players that we needed, and really redeem himself for this season and winning back the fans' appreciation. I figured by next December, if we were still 3-14 while already having a great offseason and draft, that's when Jerod should ultimately be fired. Was controversial or not, Robert Kraft did the right thing by moving on from Jerod Mayo, preventing the next 2 to 3 years of just little winning and a lot of frustration and growing pains. While he may be resetting the rebuild, he's trying to get New England back on track to their winning ways, and that begins with him. It sucks that Kraft's bet didn't pan out, and even as Jerod Mayo, I know he wasn't liked amongst the fan base as a coach, but as a player, he was adored and loved and a fan favorite. And as a coach, it was the total opposite. I just sympathize for him. I feel bad because he was given a very, very, very unfortunate hand, and he was dealt one of the worst, if not the worst, roster in the entire league. And he just went with it. He didn't know what to do, and it just was unfortunate. It's too bad he wasn't given an assistant position first and really was given time to learn and understand how to coach and then maybe take over when the time was right. So Robert Kraft is making that decision, and I allude back to my first complaint. I believe Kraft may have fallen under fan pressure again. He fired Mayo purely because the fans wanted him to. I try not to think that way, but it's definitely a possibility. Crazier things have happened. And tomorrow, on Monday, January 6th, Robert Kraft is hosting a press conference at 1 p.m. in Gillette Stadium. And this has a lot of people thinking that this could mean one of two things. It's going to be the announcement of our next head coach, and the frontrunner is Mike Vrabel as of right now. And the second option for the announcement is Robert Kraft is going to announce that he is stepping down as chairman of the New England Patriots and handing the reins off to his son, Jonathan. And for the coaching part, there are three options and three candidates that I like, and as obvious as they are, Mike Vrabel, former head coach of the Tennessee Titans, current defensive coordinator and coach for the Cleveland Browns, former Patriot, won 3 Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, and really helped form the Patriot way and is a Patriots Hall of Famer. Second, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, the number 1 seed in the NFC by the time this episode is out, and he is drawing a lot of buzz amongst the league. An offensive-minded guru who is in the Dan Campbell tree, and we know Dan Campbell is a great coach offensively and defensively. He's got a great personality, and he's just a very fun guy. A player would die to play for him. So Ben Johnson has just all this knowledge he can pass on to our current quarterbacks and really just shift the culture going forward. And lastly, my personal choice is Brian Flores, current defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, former Patriots defensive coordinator, and former Miami Dolphins head coach. When he was the head coach of the Dolphins, he was never really given a fair opportunity. Dolphins owner Stephen Ross and Brian Flores never were on the same page. For example, Flores wanted Justin Herbert, and Stephen Ross wanted Tua. They went with Tua because the owner overruled Flores' decision. Ross wanted to tank to get a better draft selection. Flores did not. So therefore, Flores was ultimately fired because he wasn't a yes man. Now, coming back to the Patriots, his alma mater for the professional sports, it would be a very great decision in my mind, as he is, to me, the greatest defensive mastermind we've had since Bill Belichick. He's been working wonders for the Vikings. Unfortunately, they could not get the 1 seed. They've dropped to the 5th seed. But still, they were a very, very sneaky, deadly 5th seed that could potentially go all the way to the Super Bowl if they play their best. But Flores on the Patriots, to me, is very poetic. It would make sense, and he would bring this defense back to ways we haven't seen in a very long time, which is a very exciting thought. And even though it's extremely unlikely that the Vikings even let him go, or he may even entertain a better offer like the Chicago Bears, I think him coming back to New England is just the right move. But ultimately, I think it goes to Mike Vrabel. And there have been reports surfacing that Mike Vrabel has already lined up a potential staff he wants to bring with him if he is hired as New England's next head coach, which to me is a little interesting that you're already assembling a staff for a job you don't even know if you have yet or not. Either way, something to think about. And I just want to give one conspiracy on why Mayo was fired, because it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Do you remember Lovie Smith when he was the Texans head coach back in 2022? Smith is a very old school head coach, very smart, and knows a lot about the game of football. At the time, the Texans were trying to tank to get a better draft pick, and on the final game versus the Indianapolis Colts, Smith was instructed to tank and lose on purpose, and being rebellious, Smith didn't want to do that, and in the end of the game, the Texans ended up winning, which resulted in Lovie Smith losing his job, but the Texans ultimately gained C.J. Stroud with the 2nd overall pick. And when I think about that, I have been anti-tank this whole season. I believe the Patriots never tanked. I always thought they were just bad, and that's why they were losing games, because if we wanted to lose on purpose, why would you try to play Drake May? Because he was obviously the better option, and so on and so forth. But I was thinking, maybe Kraft saw this opportunity with the number 1 pick on the line. He probably told Jerod, hey, go out there and lose. And then Jerod was thinking, no, I have too much pride to do that. I'm not going to go out there and lose. I'm going to coach my best game plan of all season. And then it backfired, blew up in his face, and Kraft ended up firing Jerod Mayo for losing out on the number 1 overall pick. Now, maybe like the Texans, it'll work out in our benefit, and I believe it still will, because the 4th overall pick is still a very solid spot to choose from when you have a lot of talent available. So maybe that's why Mayo was fired. We'll never know. It's just an unfortunate situation. Brought me a lot of frustration, but at the same time, it feels like there's a lot of clarity in the air. You know what I mean? Like, I just want us all to be on the same page. We've come from a great situation where we've won 6 Super Bowls in 9 attempts in 20 years. There are some teams that have never even been to a Super Bowl or only went once in their franchise's history. So for us to win 6 of those in 9 attempts, that's pretty epic. It'll never happen again, not in our lifetime. Doesn't matter. But truthfully, we all just need to be on the same page. We all want to win as much as the next guy, and going forward tomorrow, whatever happens with Robert Kraft, no matter whom he hires, no matter who our next head coach is, no matter what happens, we just got to go with the flow, trust the process, and believe that everything's going to work out. The best thing to think about out of all of this, besides our 6 championships, we have our franchise quarterback, Jerod Mayo. We have our franchise cornerback, Christian Gonzalez. And Robert Kraft knows what he's doing, and we just have to trust him because he's our last hope for this team to be successful in the future. And even if Jonathan Kraft takes over, he's been in this business his whole life. He knows how things are run, and he knows how to take care of business. And as Robert Kraft famously says, we are all patriots. Whether we win or lose, we have to support this team. We can't be frustrated, and we can't love this team only when we win. We have to be able to succeed gratefully and lose gracefully. That's how I've always seen it. If you're able to win a championship, you're also able to experience the lowest of lows. That's how football works, that's how sports work, and that's how life works. We just got to go along with this, because remember, when we're in our bad years and we're experiencing some of the worst situations of our lifetimes in terms of Patriots fans, these years will be remembered and looked back at fondly once we're at the mountaintop again and we're winning. These years are meant to weed out the fake fans and for the real true fans to show their loyalty. I'm not leaving this team, I'm not leaving this franchise, and neither should you. That's what makes us Patriots, and that's what makes us the greatest fan base in all of sports. Thank you all so much for listening. This season has been great in terms of podcasting and being online. It was just a great experience. And if it wasn't for you guys supporting me, listening, and following back and giving all of your feedback and everything, this season would have been one of the biggest struggles I've ever had to experience. I truly cannot thank you guys enough. It means the world to me that you guys take the time out of your day to listen, give me feedback, and just be a part of my daily routine. It means everything. Again, I am looking forward to writing and voicing my essay, as I call it, on the future of what I believe the Patriots should take in order to make this team better this offseason. It's very interesting, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. I hope you guys have a great day or night. And like I said, January 6th at 1 o'clock, the future of this franchise is going to take another turn once again, and hopefully for the better. Thank you all so much for listening once again. And remember, the future is bright for all of us. Go Pats.
Go Pats!